sort of book review. And the two books I will be talking about are The Wim Hof Method, Activate Your Full Human Potential by Wim Hof, and Wintering, The Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times by Katherine. I had a very unique experience reading these two books. I started out the year reading the Wim Hof Method. I had heard Wim Hof interviewed on the Michaela Peterson's podcast, and he sounded really interesting. And I thought for my specific chronic health issues that I have, or chronic illness issues that I have, it is related to my autonomic system. And so that's the system in your body that regulates your body temperature, your heart rate, blood pressure, and I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting anything. But those are the types of things that it regulates within your body. Wim Hof, years and years ago, just felt this kind of irresistible compulsion to go swimming in very cold water. And when he did, it just awoke this whole new part of him and sparked this just real love of the cold in him. And he has been able to do these really amazing feats. And through his time in the cold water and kind of the natural ways that you sort of gasp for breath and breathe while you're doing that, trying to stabilize your body temperature. When you are gasping for the breath, it does help your body temperature to stabilize. He learned these sort of breathing techniques, which is almost like you intentionally hyperventilate, followed by a period of breath holding. But it's very controlled, and it's not, he says, I've done the breathing exercises, and he says, if you feel the need to breathe, that's okay. Go ahead and breathe. So you want to be safe. So he does have some breathing tutorials that you can do. And so it had been about a year since I had tried, another kind of out there thing to help with my chronic illness symptoms. And I thought, you know what? It's time. I'm going to try the Wim Hof method because it is specifically to strengthen your autonomic system. His basic theory is that since we live in, houses with centralized heating, we're really shielded from the cold. And so that kind of weakens our autonomic systems, which, by definition, my chronic illness is a weak autonomic system. So his theory is that if you put little gentle stress on your autonomic system each day, it will strengthen eventually. And so he recommends trying the program for 3 weeks. In the book, though, he talks about doing it for a month. But then on the frequently asked questions section of his website, he talks about, it says, if people say they still aren't feeling good after 2 weeks, he said, try it for 3 weeks and you'll notice a difference then. So I decided to try this for 3 weeks. It's kind of outlandish, to do. I obviously don't have access to cold swimming water where I am, but the shower would do. So you start out the first week, you do 30-second cold showers, and then the second week, 1 minute, and then the third week, 1.5 minutes. And if I had gone to 4 weeks, I would have done 2 minutes total. And then the breathing exercises took around 1 minute total to do. So it was interesting to read this. I only made it through half of the book. I got through the, opening introductory chapters, and then his chapter on, cold showering, and then his chapter on the breathing exercises and why, he does the things that he does. And he has a lot of science to back this up. There are people that have had rheumatoid arthritis symptoms totally reversed, and a whole, depression, all sorts of chronic illness issues that have been really just totally reversed, or the symptoms have gone away a lot from using cold water and breathing exercises. He also does have a section on yoga, and I didn't get to that chapter because I just felt like I wanted to try those two things, and I've done yoga before. But he also, a lot of his motivations, his wife, when they had 4 young children, took her own life. And she had tried so many antidepressants and none of them had worked. If anything, she was worse afterwards. And so he has a real motivation for people out there who feel who despair, that this is something that could really help them. So I was, feeling, you just get more open-minded about trying kind of unusual things when you've been sick for a while. So I wanted to try this. Now, the surprising thing for me that came out of this is that The breathing exercises, first of all, are really, I don't know how to explain it. Like it's a big rush. It's kind of this natural high that you have from doing these breathing exercises. You're kind of over oxygenating your blood system for a few minutes, and you just come out really kind of euphoric from doing it. It's a really big rush. So I was surprised at kind of how wonderful I felt after the breathing, and then I was surprised that I came to really love the cold showering. I never thought I would say that, but it is incredibly invigorating and it's a wonderful way to start the day. You feel so awake, and just really, like it was like my brain fog that I have sometimes with chronic illness was totally cleared away. And I was shocked at just how much I loved that thrilling sensation of being in cold water and just how kind of alive it makes you feel. Another thing I was surprised at is how warm, towards the end of the experiment, how warm my body core temperature could stay in cold showering. It's like, I could tell that I was in cold water, but I would get out and not be shivering. So that's why I was confused. If I made that progress where my body had figured out how to stay warm in a cold shower, that none of my other symptoms were improved. And in fact, the entire time that I did this, the first 3 weeks of January, I suspected, it could be that it would fatigue me even more. I thought, you know what, let's just do it at the beginning of the year and get it over with. And I felt awful. Like the entire 3 weeks that I was doing this, I felt it was like all of my worst days just piled one on top of another. So the beginning of January, most of January, the 1st through the 21st, and then I had like 4 or 5 recovery days to just recover after this program. And I was worried I had kind of like permanently set myself back. So it really made it hard to read. Even though I come out of this month and I see how much I read, I still read a lot, but it makes reading feel much more like a battle. And so now it's really nice to just sit down with a book and it feels easier to focus on my good energy days. So I was really disappointed that I had those 3 weeks that I felt so awful and it didn't do anything. But I never want to give up hope that I could find something that would make me feel better. And I do think, I do still believe that this program helps a lot of people. And he's selling this book, right? So he's making money off the book, but he has so many free tutorials on YouTube. Like, I don't think he's doing it. I think he has pure motivations, and I think it made him feel so much better. Like, he was depressed. And I think it just really could help a lot of people. It just didn't help me. That's why, you have to know you have your own specific body. So I came out of this very discouraged, because the program didn't help me. And I know it has helped people. So I don't know if it's something you're interested, you can check out the book. I did like his writing style, but once I started to feel really lousy, I was like, you know what? If this helps me, I'm going to finish the second half of the book. If it doesn't help me, I'm going to DNF it, and I'm okay with that. So I did DNF this. My husband, I think, read the whole thing, and he's like very on board with the cold water and the breathing exercises. I might return to the breathing exercises, but I'm just kind of taking it easy for the next few weeks after it was such a really challenging January. But I want to say then, kind of the sweetness at the end of the month was Wintering, The Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times by Katherine May. This is due back at the library tomorrow. And it was yesterday. Yes, yesterday. So Thursday. It's due back at the library on Saturday. So that's, 3-day span there. Not even, 2.5 day span. I had gotten this from the library and then kind of thought, oh, I don't know if I have time for it. And I made priorities of other reading. And then I saw it on Insta Stories again. And I thought, you know what? It's due back. It's a bestseller. So it's got a lot of people that are, have it on hold. I have to bring it back unless I want to get fined. Why don't I just try it? And this was the most loving, gentle read. So Wintering is about Katherine May's experience of what she calls a wintering season in her life. So a challenging time, a period of suffering. When it was kind of started off, she can remember when her husband had appendicitis, and had to have, like, no one at the hospital was really making a priority of him. And then his appendix burst and she had to really fight for him to get surgery quickly so he didn't die. It's really wild that you have to really advocate for yourself that much sometimes. Um, and then on top of that, her son got immense anxiety after a really stressful school situation that kept getting more and more stressful. And eventually he just was not able to go to school. That's how anxious school made him. There were bullies at school. And kids can be so cruel. It's so upsetting. And then on top of that, she had had a pain in her abdomen that she had not been paying attention to for a while. And it was pretty much, it ended up being a pretty bad case of gastritis. And so she had to stay home from work. She had to take a leave. She was a writing professor and she had to take a leave. And she'd never done that. And so at the beginning of this season of wintering, she's filled with all of this guilt for taking care of herself honestly. And slowly throughout, these few months, she comes to see kind of how she had really needed it, and she didn't realize just how much she had needed it. But what really just touched me so much about this book was that often people, myself included, prior to chronic illness, when it happened, I was in shock. No, this is not my life. This is not what I signed up for. People often think you're just going to coast. And then these periods of wintering, it's not if they'll come, it is when they will come, and how you can use these as a time to really rejuvenate yourself, take care of yourself, feed your soul, and in those times, learn ways that you can grow from those times. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a real thing. When people go through it, it's a real thing. But also, people don't talk about what's more common is post-traumatic growth. So she had this period of time that she had to really slow down and not be at work. And it ended up being this time of kind of beautiful metamorphosis. And so not just writing off these times of wintering as just, I have to survive, but figuring out how to thrive in those times. And especially because there's no expiration date on chronic illness. It's possible I could have this for the rest of my life. And so I don't want to just get by. I want to thrive and really take care of myself in this time. So there were a few passages that I loved so much. This first one says, I am aware that I fly in the face of polite convention in doing this. The times when we fall out of sync with everyday life remain taboo. We're not raised to recognize wintering or to acknowledge its inevitability. Instead, we tend to see it as a humiliation, something that should be hidden from view lest we shock the world too greatly. We put on a brave public face and grieve privately. We pretend not to see each other's pain. We treat each wintering as an embarrassing anomaly that should be hidden or ignored. This means we've made a secret of an entirely ordinary process and have thereby given those who endure it a pariah status, forcing them to drop out of everyday life in order to conceal their failure. Yet we do this at a great cost. Wintering brings about some of the most profound and insightful moments of our human experience. And wisdom resides in those who have wintered. In our relentlessly busy contemporary world, we are forever trying to defer the onset of winter. We don't ever dare to feel its full bite, and we don't dare to show the way that it ravages us. An occasional sharp wintering would do us good. We must stop believing that these times in our lives are somehow silly, a failure of nerve, a lack of willpower. We must stop trying to ignore them or dispose of them. They are real, and they are asking something of us. We must learn to invite the winter in. We may never choose to winter, but we can choose how. It just was incredibly moving to me, the fact that you can admit, when you're really having a tough time and when you're not feeling well, and that repressing that and acting like things aren't as bad as they are will only make things worse in the long run. And another passage, she says, but if happiness is a skill, then sadness is too. Perhaps through all those years at school, or perhaps through other terrors, we are taught to ignore sadness, to stuff it down into our satchels and pretend it isn't there. As adults, we often have to learn to hear the clarity of its call, that is, wintering. It is the active acceptance of sadness. It is the practice of allowing ourselves to feel it as a need. It is the courage to stare down the worst parts of our experience and to commit it to healing them the best that we can. Wintering is a moment of intuition, our true needs felt keenly as a knife. So I've really been thinking about what are the things that I can do to make this situation where I don't feel very well on a lot of days to go from worse to a little bit better? What are the things that really feed me and restore me? And I want to make a priority of those. I want to make time for those. Then she talks about an Alan Watts quote. It says, "For Watts, the only moment we can depend on is the present, that which we know and sense right now. The past is gone. The future, to which we devote so much of our brain power, is an unstable element, entirely unknowable, a will-o'-the-wisp that ever eludes our grasp. When we endlessly ruminate over distant times, we miss extraordinary things in the present moment. These extraordinary things are, in actual fact, all we have, the here and now, the direct perception of our senses. Whenever I return to Watts' work, a small, rebellious voice rises up in me and shouts, 'That's not fair. Life is more secure for some people than for others.' But that doesn't make his wisdom any less true. Watts isn't offering us a cheap, puffed-up solution to the vagaries of life. He's telling us that if we can only master this small trick of thought, all our dreams will come to fruition. He is telling us the truth. Change will not stop happening. The only part we can control is our response." And then another passage, I just had to put stickies on this. I'm going to get a copy of this at some point because it was just so beautiful. "I'm beginning to think that unhappiness is one of the simple things in life, a pure, basic emotion to be respected, if not savored. I would never dream of suggesting that we should wallow in misery or shrink from doing everything we can to alleviate it, but I do think it's instructive. After all, unhappiness has a function. It tells us that something is going wrong. If we don't allow ourselves the fundamental honesty of our own sadness, then we miss an important cue to adapt. We seem to be living in an age when we're bombarded with entreaties to be happy, but we're suffering from an avalanche of depression. We're urged to stop sweating the small stuff, yet we're chronically anxious. I often wonder if these are just normal feelings that become monstrous when they are denied. A great deal of life will always suck. There will be moments when we're riding high and moments when we can't bear to get out of bed. Both are normal. Both, in fact, require a little perspective." So this book was just so beautiful and just such a gentle read. And like I said, after all the discouragement for, this new thing that I thought would treat and heal and fix my chronic illness, it didn't work. This was such a balm to my soul at the end of the month. She's talking about coming out of this. This is in the epilogue, coming out of that season of wintering in her life. She says, "But here I am, and here it is. The only difference, the only reason I have finished this is experience. I recognized winter. I saw it coming, and I looked it in the eye. I greeted it and let it in. I had some tricks up my sleeve, you see. I've learned them the hard way. When I started feeling the drag of winter, I began to treat myself like a favored child, with kindness and love. I assumed my needs were reasonable and that my feelings were signals of something important. I kept myself well fed and made sure I was getting enough sleep. I took myself for walks in the fresh air and spent time doing things that soothed me. I asked myself, what is this winter all about? I asked myself, what change is coming? Nature shows that survival is a practice. Sometimes it flourishes, lays on fat garlands itself in leaves, makes abundant honey, and sometimes it pares back to the very basics of existence in order to keep living. It doesn't do this once, resentfully, assuming that one day it will get things right and everything will smooth out. It winters in cycles again and again, forever and ever. It attends to this work each and every day. For plants and humans, winter is part of the job. The same is true for humans." So it was just exactly what I needed, and this idea of really being honest when you're going through these tough seasons and figuring out how to nourish yourself, how to really take care of yourself in those times. So I did think about, what are the things that really this month, when I was feeling even worse than usual, what are the things that really brought me some relief, brought me some respite? And I want to go out of my way to be doing those things throughout this year. Those things that really are just a rest for me. And I thought of several things. One, I have finally, I feel like knitting again. What happened is that I kind of get overwhelmed by knitting garments. It overwhelms me. And with embroidery, unfortunately, I get really intimidated by the projects that I have. So I have been knitting projects that are not garments, that are like decorative and baby gifts, those sort of things, like name buntings. And that is really lovely. So listening to audiobooks while knitting, I find incredibly relaxing and calming. Also, I got a subscription for, what is it, A Year in Mitford, that I am one of the hosts of, because Jan Karen, who's the author of the Mitford books, is the author in residence for Victoria magazine. And so I wanted to read her articles, but it was such a lovely experience on the days when I was just, this was a little piece of bliss, you know, that I could pick up and enjoy these beautiful pictures. I mean, it's just filled with loveliness. Yeah, I mean, look at this. It's just relaxing on my brain to look at this and enjoy the beautiful pictures and hear about other people's experiences. And I mean, all of the coziness that is in this magazine. So I went ahead and I subscribed to Southern Living magazine and Better Homes and Gardens because they had a like year-long subscription for $5 deal. So I will definitely be doing that. And what else? Oh, taking book baths. So having some nice music on, maybe candles, but that takes more planning. And sitting in the bathtub and soaking with a book. I'm going to do it again tonight. And that's, to me, should just happen like as many times as possible in the fall and the winter. Once spring and summer hit, you know, it's not something that I usually crave as much. Also, reading books aloud to my boys, particularly the children's chapter books that Peter and I have been reviewing. I find that as a time that just really feeds my soul to read these really simple, comforting stories. But just because they're simple doesn't mean they're less meaningful. They're just really, it's gentle, you know, to read children's literature. So those are the things that I feel just, you know, so warm and safe and calm when I am doing them. And also hot chocolate. The season of hot chocolate is still here. I say it's like all winter is hot chocolate, not just like Christmas time. So those are my thoughts on these two books. I hope that you enjoyed hearing them, and I would love to know if you have read either of them and kind of what you think. And I'll be back for another video soon. Bye.